How many of you know you need to be more visible, but feel resistance every time you try? You know visibility matters. You know people need to hear from you, see you, understand what you do, especially if you're building a business. Hi, I'm Jenny, and this is my weekly expert talk about procrastination and empowerment. And this week's talk is from the invisible to influential, learning to be seen without burning out. So you sit down to post something, and suddenly you're thinking, oh, what if this sounds stupid? What if people judge me? What if nobody responds? What if I say the wrong thing? So you overthink. You rewrite it 5 times, or you just don't post it at all. Or maybe you do post and then spend the next few hours checking reactions, wondering what people think, feeling emotionally exposed. And after that, you disappear again for a while. And if you're honest with yourself, there's probably a part of you that feels frustrated by this because logically it doesn't make sense. You might be intelligent, experienced, incredibly capable in your work. You can solve problems. You can support other people. You can lead in your career. So why does posting one video or sharing one opinion online feel so emotionally intense? Because this isn't actually about content. It's not really about confidence either. It's about what being seen represents to your subconscious. Because for many people, visibility has never truly felt safe. Not emotionally, not subconsciously. And this is something most people completely miss. They think, I just need to push myself more. I need to stop caring what people think. I need more confidence. But when visibility feels unsafe, pushing harder usually creates more resistance because your subconscious isn't asking, will this grow the business? It's asking, will this hurt us emotionally? And if the answer feels like yes, your system will try to protect you through procrastination, perfectionism, hesitation, inconsistency, or just disappearing. And it's not because you're lazy, not because you're incapable, but because some part of you has learned that being seen is risky. So instead of asking, why can't I just show up consistently? A more powerful question becomes, why does being seen feel unsafe in the first place? Because when you understand that, everything starts to make sense. So let's talk about where this actually begins. Because most people were not born afraid of visibility. At some point, you learn something about speaking up, standing out, taking up space, or being fully seen. And those experiences shaped how safe visibility feels today. So let's look at the conditioning of invisibility and how so many women learned that staying unseen was safer than being fully expressed. So let's talk about where this fear of visibility actually begins. Because most people are not born believing it is dangerous to be seen. That belief is learned quietly, gradually, over time, through experiences that taught you whether it was emotionally safe to fully express yourself. And for many women, the message was not always direct. No one necessarily sat you down and said, don't be visible, but you absorbed it anyway, through moments where speaking up didn't feel safe. Being noticed led to criticism. Expressing yourself led to rejection. Or taking up space made other people uncomfortable. So in your early conditioning, maybe you learned to stay quiet, to not make a fuss, to be easy, to not draw too much attention to yourself. And I can remember in my child being told to be seen and not heard. And some of you out there might have had similar messages. And then on the other hand, maybe you were rewarded for being helpful, being capable, being agreeable, being the one who handled everything quietly. And maybe when you did express yourself, you were dismissed, criticized, corrected, laughed at, ignored, or emotionally shut down. So your subconscious started learning something important. Visibility can lead to pain. And once that association forms, your system adapts. Not because you're weak, but because adaptation is how humans protect themselves. So invisibility actually becomes a strategy, a way to stay safe emotionally. You learn to blend in, over-prepare, observe before speaking, stay competent rather than visible. And often you become very successful at it. And you become dependable, capable, and high-performing, but quietly so. You learn how to contribute without fully exposing yourself. And that works in many environments, especially in workplaces where being productive, reliable, and low maintenance is rewarded more than being fully expressed. But over time, there's a cost to invisibility. Because while it protects you from judgment, it also keeps you from being fully seen, fully known, fully valued, and eventually part of you starts wanting more. You want to share your ideas, to use your voice, to build something meaningful, to stop hiding who you really are. But the moment you move towards visibility, the old conditioning activates. And your subconscious remembers being seen didn't feel safe before. And suddenly, posting feels overwhelming, showing up feels exposing, visibility feels emotionally risky. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your system is trying to protect you using old information. So invisibility was never weakness. It was an adaptation. It was your system learning this is how we stay safe. And when you understand that, you stop shaming yourself because you probably are doing that at the moment. And you stop shaming yourself for struggling to be visible now. And this resistance didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of conditioning. And this is where things become really challenging because entrepreneurship requires something that directly conflicts with that conditioning. To build a business, you need visibility. You need people to hear you, see you, understand what you do, and that creates an internal clash. One part of you says, I need to show up, and another part says, but being seen doesn't feel safe. And that conflict is where so much procrastination, perfectionism, and inconsistency comes from. So let's look at what happens when you desire to grow, or your desire to grow, collides with your subconscious need to stay safe. So now we can start to understand why visibility feels so difficult. Because what's happening is not just hesitation, it's a clash between your desire to grow and your subconscious need to stay safe. On one side, you consciously know visibility matters. You know people need to know you exist. People need to hear your message, and people need to understand how you can help them, especially if you're building a business. You understand that logically. But on the other side, your subconscious has years of conditioning saying being seen is risky, visibility leads to judgment, and exposure is dangerous. And when these two collide, you experience resistance. And this clash shows up in ways that often look confusing from the outside because consciously you want to show up, but subconsciously you're trying to avoid emotional exposure. So what happens? You procrastinate, you overthink, you overprepare, you endlessly tweak content, and you consume instead of create, like doing more and more courses, getting more and more certificates. Or you just disappear completely for periods of time. And the frustrating part is you often know exactly what you should be doing, but knowing isn't the problem. Safety is. So why does visibility feel so intense? It's because visibility is not neutral to your subconscious. Visibility has had meaning put with it over a long period of time. And to your subconscious, it means being judged, being misunderstood, being criticized, being disagreed with, or being rejected. And your subconscious interprets all of that as an emotional risk. So when you go to post something, it's not just upload the post. Your system experiences more like, oh my God, we're about to expose ourselves. And so your subconscious responds accordingly through hesitation, anxiety, perfectionism, or avoidance. Not because you're incapable, but because your system is trying to prevent emotional pain. So this leads to burnout, and it happens in a cycle. It creates a pattern that so many people get trapped in. And the cycle looks like this. You force yourself to become visible. You override the discomfort. You push hard for a while. But because it doesn't feel safe, you become emotionally exhausted. So you pull back, you disappear, you retreat, and then guilt kicks in. And then you're thinking things like, I need to be more consistent. I need to try harder. So you push yourself again, and the cycle repeats. And this is why visibility can feel so draining. Not because visibility itself is the problem, but because you're trying to force yourself through something that your subconscious still experiences as unsafe. You are not avoiding visibility because you're lazy. You're avoiding the vulnerability that comes with being seen. And once you understand that, everything changes. Because now the goal is no longer force yourself to show up. The goal becomes create safety around being seen. And I also want to say this. Visibility does not require you to become someone you're not. You do not need to become louder, become more performative, or become more polished, or even become consistently on. Because a lot of the visibility advice online is based on hustle energy. More content, more noise, more pressure, more exposure. And for many people, that approach creates burnout, not influence. So if forcing visibility creates exhaustion, then what's the alternative? How do you become visible without overwhelming yourself? How do you build influence without abandoning yourself in the process? Because visibility does not have to mean performance or pressure or constant output or emotional exhaustion. There is another way to approach this, a way that feels sustainable, grounded, safe enough for your subconscious to support. So let's talk about how to redefine visibility without becoming the hustle version of yourself. So now we come to something really important. Because once people realize that visibility feels unsafe, the next question becomes, how do I actually show up without overwhelming myself? And this is where I think so much visibility advice gets it wrong. Because most visibility advice is built around hustle energy. And it's saying things like post more, be louder, be everywhere, push through the fear, stay constantly visible. And for a lot of people, especially women who already feel emotionally overloaded, that approach doesn't create confidence. It creates burnout. So I want to offer you a completely different way of thinking about visibility. One that is more sustainable, more grounded, and much safer for your subconscious to work with. Because visibility does not require you to become someone else. The first shift is visibility is not performance. A lot of people unconsciously believe to be visible, I need to perform. To sound impressive, to be highly polished, to have endless energy, and always know exactly what to say. But influence does not come from performance. It comes from resonance, from honesty, from clarity, from people feeling she understands me. And that means you do not need to become louder, more extroverted, more online, or more performative. And let me be very clear, I am not an extrovert. I am absolutely an introvert. I reveled in COVID. I loved being stuck at home. It was fabulous for me. I was hanging out with my cats. I was still doing my work, but I was hanging out with my cats every day. So I was not missing the office. I was not missing being surrounded by people. I was not missing people nattering away to me. I really am absolutely an introvert. So anyway, to become more influential, you simply need to become more willing and willing to let yourself be seen. So the second shift is visibility can be safe. And this is something that you might be doubting. That might be something you're thinking, oh my God, I don't know of a way to do this. But this is one of the biggest shifts. Most people approach visibility like this. I need to force myself through the fear. But when your subconscious experiences visibility as danger, and it's literally that's how it's defined in your subconscious, force creates more resistance. So instead, we create safe visibility, visibility that feels manageable, gradual, and repeatable. And that might look like one honest post, one short video, sharing one opinion, speaking in a smaller space first. So like if you're in if you've got a mentor and they've got a group, um, you could start with doing lives in that group. So you're not going out to the wider public to start with. You're just starting with a limited number of people. And ideally in a group like that, the people are supportive and will give you, congratulations and high fives for going live. And particularly if you say and are actually honest about the fact that going live is terrifying for you, that in a group like that, you are more likely to be supported and have a safe experience where you get good feedback and support as a result. So every time you show up safely, your subconscious learns, I can survive being seen. And that's how confidence is built. So the third shift is influence comes from consistency, not intensity. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to become intensely visible all at once. And they try posting constantly for a week, push themselves emotionally, override their discomfort, and then they disappear for a month. And I've done that myself. I've absolutely done that myself. So that's not a visibility problem, that's a sustainability problem. But because influence is not built through emotional intensity, it's built through consistency, small, repeated, sustainable visibility. Not forcing yourself into overwhelm, just taking small actions that don't feel terrifying, but making those small actions over and over again gives you that sustainability. So the fourth shift is being seen does not require self-abandonment. And this one matters deeply because many people unconsciously believe if I become visible, I will lose myself. And that they'll have to constantly please other people. They'll have to tolerate criticism. They'll have to explain themselves endlessly. And worst of all, absorb everyone's opinions. But visibility does not require self-abandonment. You can have boundaries. You can disagree with people. And surprisingly enough, you can survive criticism because you don't have to take it on board. And you can stay grounded while being visible. And that's an important part of becoming influential. Not becoming unaffected, but becoming steady enough to remain yourself while being seen. And that's an important part of it there, to remain yourself while being seen. So the fifth shift is visibility builds self-trust. Every time you show up safely, even in a small way, you are building evidence that you can handle this. You can survive visibility. You can keep showing up. And over time, that changes your identity. Because confidence doesn't appear first. Safe visibility creates confidence. So you do not need to become fearless to become invisible. You simply need to create enough safety to keep showing up. And that changes everything. So if visibility can be safe, gradual, and sustainable, then the next question becomes, how do you actually begin? How do you move from hiding, hesitating, and overthinking into becoming someone who can be seen without burning herself out in the process? because there's a way to build visibility that works with your subconscious instead of constantly fighting against it. So let's look at how to become safely visible in a way your system can actually sustain. So now that we've redefined visibility, the question becomes, how do you actually begin becoming visible in a way that feels safe enough to sustain? Because this isn't about forcing yourself to suddenly become hyper confident, constantly online, or emotionally unaffected. It's about gradually building your capacity to be seen. And that happens step by step, not through pressure, but through safe repetition. So let me walk you through a few shifts that make visibility feel far more manageable. Step one is start. Step one is start smaller than your ego wants to. One of the reasons visibility feels overwhelming is because people often try to jump too far ahead. You know, you're told things like feel the fear and do it anyway, or you have to have courage to overcome procrastination and leap wildly into the distance, and everything will work out. But when people try to jump too far ahead, they think, I should already be doing live videos. I should already be posting every day. I should already be fully confident. And instantly, the pressure rises. So instead, start smaller. Not because you're incapable, but because safety creates consistency. This is how you overcome what your subconscious is holding on to, the mistaken beliefs that are there. If you can, you actually need to prove to your subconscious that it's not dangerous to become visible. So maybe instead of posting every day, you post once this week. Maybe instead of a long, polished video, you just record a short, honest one. And don't be worried if you make mistakes. Don't be worried if you fumble over words. And yes, I fumble over words and I carry on and I'm not worried about it. But there was a time when I would have thrown out a video if I was fumbling over my words. Pardon me. But maybe instead of trying to sound like an expert, you simply speak like yourself. Because sustainable visibility begins at the edge of your current capacity, not 5 steps beyond it. Stay where you are and just edge a little bit forward. And then when you've safely survived that, edge a little bit forward again. You don't need to go a long way outside your comfort zone. Just a teeny tiny amount that is less likely to trigger your subconscious. It's less likely to engage the danger warnings in your subconscious. So just going a little bit out, there might be a little bit of fear with it, but it's not as much. It's not as much to trigger all of the things that your subconscious has in place to stop you from moving ahead. So step 2, share before you feel ready. And this one is important because many people are waiting for a feeling that often comes after visibility, not before it. They think, once I feel confident, I'll show up. But confidence is built through evidence, and evidence comes from posting, speaking, sharing, and surviving the experience. So instead of waiting to feel fully ready, you begin before certainty arrives. Not recklessly, though, not by overwhelming yourself, but by taking small visible actions. Before your subconscious feels completely comfortable, and every time you do that safely, you expand your capacity. So step 3 is regulate before visibility. And this is something most people skip entirely. And it's something that I needed to put in place at the start of the day, because I would sit at my desk ready to do some work on my business, and instantly I would be launched into a procrastination cycle. So you need to start this step before you try and go into an action. You need to recognize where your procrastination cycle starts. Hold that thought. Just my cat getting stuck in the window. So, this is something most people skip entirely. They try to create content while already anxious, already tense, or already emotionally activated. And then they wonder why visibility feels exhausting. So instead, pause first, breathe, nice, slow, deep breathing. Ground yourself. So if you're sitting on a chair, feel the chair under you, feel the chair supporting you. Even put your hands, if you've got arms on the chair, feel your arms on the chair arms. Or if you're standing, feel the floor under your feet. And even put your, if you're next to a wall, if you're close to a wall, stand with your hand on the wall. That's what grounding is about. It makes you feel solid and stable and supported. And then support yourself emotionally before you show up. And that can be taking a few slow breaths. For me, it's EFT tapping. So just tapping through, and can't say this often enough, you don't have to say anything when you tap. I know a lot of tapping is done with specific sentences and really nice flowing statements. It doesn't have to be that way. You don't even have to say anything. You can just think about what it is that's upsetting you or feeling discomfort and tap through the points. Just keep tapping through the points. And that is when I used to procrastinate about tapping, because I would judge myself for what I was going to say, and I would think it was never going to be the right thing. Don't worry about what you say. You don't have to say anything. You can just tap. Obviously, if you can say stuff while you're tapping, that's all to the good, but you don't have to say anything. And then another thing you can do is reminding yourself, I'm safe even if people see me. So let me say that again. I'm safe even if people see me. Because visibility becomes much easier when your subconscious doesn't feel under threat. So doing those things first before you step into visibility cuts off your subconscious's ability to trigger responses that take you away from visibility. So step 4 is detach visibility from validation. Let me say that again. Detach visibility from validation. This shift changes everything, because many people unconsciously believe if people don't respond positively, I've failed. But visibility is not about universal approval. And even if you're posting and no one is responding, there's no likes, there's no comments, It doesn't mean that people are not reading your post and getting something out of it. Some people in your audience who desperately need your help may not be ready to make the connection, but they are consuming your content. So putting stuff out there and not getting a response initially doesn't mean people are not consuming your content. So don't label it as a failure when you don't initially get a response, because it might be a slow burn. And also, not everyone is going to agree with you. Not everyone will resonate with you, and not everyone will understand you. And that's okay. Influence is not built by pleasing everyone. It's built by being clear, consistent, and staying grounded in your message. So instead of asking, did everyone like it? Ask, did I show up honestly? Did I show up honestly? That's the shift. And you don't need everybody to like your stuff. And it's okay if some people don't resonate with it, because not everyone is going to resonate with what you're saying. You just need the people who have the issue that you know how to solve to be resonating and understanding what you're saying and connecting with it. So step 5 is build capacity slowly. Slowly. So remember this. Visibility tolerance is something you build, just like emotional resilience. You don't suddenly wake up one day completely comfortable being seen. You become comfortable through safe repetition, through showing up again and again in ways your system can actually sustain. And eventually, what once felt terrifying starts to feel normal. Not because fear magically disappears, but because your subconscious learns being seen is survivable. I can handle this. I'm still safe. So I want you to take a moment and ask yourself, what's one way I could become 5% more visible this week? So what's one way I could become 5% more visible this week? Not 100%, not perfectly, just slightly more visible. One post, one video, one honest moment of expression. Because that's how this shift happens, not all at once, but one safe step at a time. And think about it from this perspective, because your subconscious may be saying, oh my God, it's not enough. One step is not enough. You need to do more, 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 more. One piece is more than procrastination. How long have you been procrastinating? How long have you not been taking even one step? So one step is more than procrastination. So take that one safe step at a time. So as you begin taking those small visible steps, something deeper starts changing. But this isn't just about posting more content. It's about identity. You're moving from someone who hides, hesitates, and stays small to stay safe. And you're changing into someone who allows yourself to be seen, trusts yourself more deeply, and gradually becomes more influential. Not through force, though, but through safe, sustainable visibility. So let's look at the identity shift that happens when you stop hiding and start allowing yourself to be seen. So now we come to the deeper transformation underneath all of this, because this journey was never just about visibility. It was never just about posting more, creating content, or building confidence online. It's actually about identity, about who you become when you stop hiding and start allowing yourself to be seen. Because for a long time, being invisible probably felt safer. Safer to stay quiet, stay agreeable, stay behind the scenes, or stay in the role of the capable helper. And maybe that worked for a while. Maybe it protected you. Maybe it helped you succeed in certain environments. But eventually, there comes a point where invisibility starts costing more than visibility. Because when you consistently hide, and you're hiding your voice, your ideas, your gifts, and your perspective, you don't just stay safe, you also stay unseen. And over time, that creates another kind of pain, the pain of knowing you have more to offer, wanting to contribute more deeply, wanting to build something meaningful, but feeling unable to fully step forward. So your old identity often sounds like stay small, don't draw attention to yourself, wait until you're fully ready, make sure nobody can criticize you. So you over prepare, you overthink, you hold back, and you wait for certainty that never fully arrives. And it's not because you're incapable, but because invisibility became associated with safety. But the identity you're moving into looks very different. Not louder, not more performative, just more available to be seen. This version of you shares before everything feels perfect, allows yourself to take up space, trusts yourself more deeply, survives being visible, and keeps showing up anyway. And it's not because fear disappears, because fear is never going to disappear entirely. And you're no longer letting fear decide who you get to be. And this is important to understand. Influential people are not fearless people. They are people who learned they could survive being seen. They learned they could handle disagreement. They could survive judgment. They could remain themselves while visible. And over time, that creates influence. Not because they've become perfect, but because they became consistent. Consistently visible, consistently honest, and consistently willing to show up. So the shift isn't how do I become someone completely different? The shift is how do I stop abandoning myself every time I become visible? Because true influence comes from being fully yourself. So true influence comes from being fully yourself. And it's without collapsing under the pressure of being seen. So I want you to take a moment and think about the version of you who no longer hides. Not because she's fearless, but because she trusts herself enough to be seen. How does she speak? How does she show up? How does she carry herself? And what would change in your life if you started becoming her one small step at a time? Because that identity is already beginning to emerge. Every time you speak up, share honestly, stay visible a little longer, stop abandoning yourself to stay safe, you strengthen it each time. And this is where everything begins to come together. Because this journey was never really about social media. It was about safety, identity, self-trust, and allowing yourself to exist more fully in the world. And when that starts to shift, visibility no longer feels like something you survive. It becomes something you can sustain. So let's bring this all together and talk about what becomes possible when you stop hiding and start allowing yourself to be seen. So before we finish, I want you to take a moment and just notice what's shifted for you. Because maybe for the first time, you've realized something important. Visibility was never really the problem. The problem was that being seen didn't feel safe. And when you understand that, so much of your past starts to make sense. The hesitation, the overthinking, the disappearing, the perfectionism, not as weakness, not as failure, but as protection. Your subconscious trying to keep you emotionally safe in the only way it knew how. And maybe for a long time, invisibility really did protect you. Maybe staying quiet, staying agreeable, staying behind the scenes helped you avoid criticism, rejection, judgment, and emotional pain. But at some point, what once protected you started limiting you because the version of you who wants impact, freedom, connection, influence, and a meaningful business cannot stay hidden forever. And this is the identity shift. From it's safer not to be seen to I can learn to be visibly safety. I can learn to be visible safely. From I need to avoid judgment to I can survive being misunderstood. I have to become someone else to be influential. To my influence grows when I become more fully myself. Because influence is not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being willing to consistently show up as yourself. And that kind of visibility doesn't require burnout. It requires self-trust. So I want to leave you with one question. What might become possible if you stopped treating visibility like danger and started treating it like expansion? Because the version of you who you've been waiting for isn't someone who never feels fear. It's someone who no longer abandons herself when fear appears. You do not need to become louder to become influential. You simply need to stop hiding who you really are. And you get to decide what comes next. So thank you for listening to this. I hope you got a lot out of it. And I'll see you for my talk next week.